Lessons in Logic, video number 11, I believe. And let's talk about putting arguments into standard form in the best way we can. Now, the point of logic is to evaluate arguments to see whether the premises of the argument do a good enough job supporting their conclusion. In inductive logic, we're interested in whether the premises of the argument provide good probabilistic support for the conclusion. In deductive logic, we're interested in whether the premises of the argument guarantee the conclusion. Now, this is especially important for deductive logic because validity depends on form, not content, which is to say, well, let's make sure we define the term validity. An argument is valid in the technical sense in which we're using the term valid in logic class. An argument is valid if it's not possible for the premises to be true and the conclusion false at the same time. In other words, an argument is valid if it's a successful deductive argument. A deductive argument is one that's meant to guarantee the conclusion given the premises. And an argument is valid if the structure of the argument is such that it's not even possible for the premises to be true and the conclusion false at the same time. In other words, an argument is valid if the premises really do succeed in guaranteeing the conclusion 100% certainty. That is to say, if the premises are true, the conclusion must be true. That's a valid argument. So in deductive logic, we're concerned with tests for validity. And the two main branches of deductive logic are statement logic and categorical logic. And in both of these branches of deductive logic, what we do is we break down an argument into its small parts, and we examine the way the argument is constructed out of those parts, look at the shape of the argument, the form of the argument, or the structure of the argument to see if it's valid, because validity depends entirely on that shape or that structure, or this phrasing, which I like, it depends entirely on form, not content, meaning on the way we reason about things, not on the things we reason about. So when you put an argument into standard form, it's much easier to check it for validity because we've taken all the words from the ordinary language people might have used in constructing an argument. And we've moved aside all the language and we've identified the structure of the reasoning, identified the form. We've identified the way we're reasoning about things, not the things we reason about. When we put an argument into standard form, all we have to look at is the way we reason about things, not the things we reason about. And all we have to look at is the way we reason about things, not the things we reason about. We've, so to speak, reduced the argument to its structure, to the manner of reasoning, which is all we need to have to check it for validity. Okay, so the best way to put an argument into standard form for purposes of categorical logic and statement logic is a scheme of abbreviation. Now, you might find this called something else. Translation guide. I've seen this called a translation guide. Scheme of abbreviation is the terminology I prefer. Using a scheme of abbreviation will allow us to check an argument for validity or invalidity by looking at only the form. In other words, once the scheme of abbreviation is present and the argument is in standard form, using that scheme, we don't need to care about anything in the content of the argument. All we need to concentrate on, and all we can concentrate on, is the form, which is exactly what we want. That's how we investigate validity most efficiently. So here's what a scheme of abbreviation is. It's using capital letters to symbolize the components of an argument. And then we reconstruct the argument using those symbols. With categorical logic, we would use capital letters to represent terms. With proposition logic, we use capital letters to represent simple propositions. Oh, I didn't spell this out yet in this video. It's been done in previous videos. Two main branches of deductive logic, categorical logic and statement logic, or proposition logic. In categorical logic, we break an argument down into its constituent terms. In statement logic, we break it down into its constituent statements or propositions. Now, this will be much clearer if I just illustrate. So just watch the illustration. This will illustrate what categorical logic and statement logic are. If you don't already know that, this will illustrate how we do this, and it will illustrate how we put arguments into standard form in the most efficient way. And this will be important. And this will hopefully make the next 2 units of this Lessons in Logic playlist, the unit on categorical logic and the unit on statement logic, much simpler. So let's make a scheme of abbreviation and put an argument into standard form in categorical logic and then in statement logic. Now, first, I got to find an argument. What sort of argument in categorical logic do I want to use? Let's say, let's do one about philosophers. Now, if you want to find out whether this argument has true premises, study Augustine's Contra Academicos, Against the Academics. This argument will come up, I believe, in book 1. But for our purposes, we don't care if the premises are true. We just want to, actually, maybe not this argument, but some of its premises will certainly come up. Anyway, actually, I think this will come up here. A specific argument probably does turn up in book 1 of Contra Academicos by Augustine. Anyway, what we care about in logic is just, do the premises support the conclusion? And what we care about today is not even that. We just care about what is the form of the argument. And let's put it into standard form. So here are our terms: philosophers, people who seek wisdom, wise people, and happy people. You'll note that the word people doesn't occur next to the word happy. It's sort of implied. So we could try to clean up the argument this way. We could try to add the word people. We could say happy people. We could say happy people. And we could change people who seek wisdom to people who are seeking wisdom, or change people who are seeking wisdom to people who seek wisdom. So the language is uniform. So we're using the same words, but that would be missing the point. What we should, and wise could become wise people, but that's not the point. Now, that would be missing the point. The point is to take these terms and make it all uniform using the scheme of abbreviation. So let's use P for our first term, philosophers. And let's use S for people who seek wisdom. And of course, W for wise people, and H for happy people. And that's it. Those are our only terms. Now, please do not get confused. Your goal here is just to use a symbol. Any symbol would do in theory, but it's most convenient to use capital letters. In theory, we could have used numbers, but then we wouldn't be able to number our premises and conclusion. We're about to type up the argument in standard form. All P, R, S will be our first premise. We're going to do that soon. But if we were using numbers to symbolize the terms, then we wouldn't be able to number the argument very easily now, would we? It's easier to use capital letters. We could have used triangles and squares, but they're hard to type. It's just better to use capital letters, and that way you can have a capital letter have some connection to the term it's representing, although technically that's not necessary. We could have used A, B, C, D, or X, Y, Z, W, X, Y, Z if we wanted to. But I think it's convenient to do it this way. But don't think, since you had a P here for philosophers, don't think since you had a word starting with P, philosophers, and that you were using that P to represent that you can then use P again for people who are seeking wisdom or people who are wise. No, you cannot use the same letter to represent more than one term. Speaking of terms, let me interrupt myself like I do to say, if I haven't said this explicitly yet in this video, I think I have not. A term is a noun or noun phrase that stands for a category or a class or a group. So philosophers is a term, people who seek wisdom is a term, wise people is a term, happy people are a term. And all this argument is using the letters P, S, W, H to respectively represent philosophers, people who seek wisdom, wise people, and happy people. All the argument is premise, all PRS, premise, all W, all SOW, sorry. Premise, all WRH, and conclusion, all PRH. Now you might notice it sure looks like a valid argument. It looks like the premises guarantee the conclusion. Great. Well, we're not going to demonstrate it today. We could, by the end of our second unit, the end of our categorical logic unit, we will be able to demonstrate validity for an argument like that. We're not doing that today. Today, all we're doing is putting it into standard form, but good if you can see that. It should be easier to see just looking at these symbols, all PRS, all SOW, all W or H, so all P or H, that the argument is indeed valid, the premises guarantee the conclusion. Now let's check our work. The first premise tells us all philosophers are people who seek wisdom. That's all PRS. So far, so good. Our next premise, let's bold that first premise. Our next premise, all people who are seeking wisdom are wise. Let's italicize that. All people who are seeking wisdom are wise. All S or W. All people who are seeking wisdom are wise. All S or W. Yes, that is our second premise. And now this one might be a little trickier. If anyone is wise, he or she is also happy. Since I can't underline, I'm already underlined. I've already done bold and italics. Let's put this in red. If anyone is wise, he or she is also happy. This is telling us all wise people are happy people, all W R H. And now, therefore, all philosophers are happy. The conclusion, we'll put that one in blue. All philosophers are happy is the conclusion. And it turns out that has indeed been demonstrated, but only given that the premises are true. But most importantly, since we don't even care if it's demonstrated, we care that we have successfully symbolized the argument. Let's get rid of the colors, underlining, highlighting, italics that are unnecessary. Here we go. This is how you symbolize an argument in categorical logic and use capital letters to represent terms, but in statement logic, you use capital letters to represent simple statements. That means statements that are not made of any other statements. We'll talk about this later when we get to our unit on statement logic or proposition logic. Proposition logic and statement logic mean the same thing. Let's come up with a quick argument here. If it is raining, if it is still raining, then I will be wet by the time I get home. Let's say all wet. If it is still raining, then I'll be all wet by the time I get home. If I am wet by the time I get home, then If it is still raining, then I will be all wet by the time I get home. If I am wet when I get home, then my wife will want me to put on a different shirt. There we go. Weird argument. I don't know if it's valid. I'd want to symbolize it first. There's a few complexities in how this argument is laid out, but there is indeed an umbrella over there, in fact, two, and it probably is still raining. But let's look at the argument. If it is still raining, then I will be all wet by the time I get home. If I'm wet when I get home, then my wife will want me to put on a different shirt. If I do not want to put on a different shirt, which I don't, if my wife will want me to, then I should grab that umbrella over there. Well, we need a conclusion. There we go. If it's still raining, then I'm going to be wet when I get home, in which case my wife will want me to change shirts, which I don't want to do, in which case if it's still raining, I should grab an umbrella. That's the gist of the argument. Now let's symbolize it. Let's identify all the little statements it's made up of. Let's do R for it is raining. Let's see, let's use W for I will be wet when I get home. S, can't use W again for wife. Let's use S for shirt. D for different. Let's use D for different. Really, it doesn't matter what capital letter you use as long as you can keep track of them. My wife will want me to put on a different shirt when I get home. Can be symbolized as D. Now U for I should grab that umbrella over there. And then we need one more sentence, and that would be something about how I don't want to change shirts when I get home. Now you might think that, we haven't used S yet, let's use S for it. You might think, I do not want to change shirts when I get home is the atomic statement we want to symbolize. But no, I just said atomic statement. We'll talk about this more when we get to our unit on statement logic. But we should be symbolizing the smallest statements. And that means the statements that are not made of any other statements, which we call the atomic statements or the simple statements in statement logic or proposition logic. So what would be an atomic statement? I do not want to change shirts when I get home, or would it be I do want to change shirts when I get home? That's our actual atomic statement. Now, the premise of the argument is not saying that. It's saying I don't want to change shirts when I get home. So that premise is a denial of the atomic proposition that I want to change shirts when I get home. In other words, our premise here is going to be not S. When we symbolize that premise, that's what we're going to symbolize it as, because we want to symbolize the statements that are not made of any other statements. And the statement, I do not want to change my shirt when I get home, is made of the statement, I do want to change shirts when I get home. There's the statement, I want to change shirts when I get home, and then there's its denial. The denial is made of the other one, but not so much vice versa. Okay, so now that's one of our premises. Let's symbolize the others, and let's make this fast because I got to be somewhere really soon. If it is still raining, then I'll be all wet by the time I get home. R, I guess we should include still in our symbolization, R for it is still raining. If R, then W, that's our first premise. If it is still raining, then I'll be wet when I get home. If I'm still wet when I get home, then my wife will want me to put on a different shirt when I get home. If W, then D. If I do not want to put on a different shirt, then yes, if I do not want to put on a different shirt and, okay, let's underline what I'm symbolizing here. I've already symbolized which I don't as not S. I do not want to change shirts when I get home. If I do not want to put on a different shirt, and if my wife will want me to, then I should grab that umbrella over there. Here's how we symbolize that using our scheme of abbreviation. If not S and D, then U. That's it. If I do not want to put on a different shirt, and if my wife will want me to, then I should grab that umbrella. If not S, where S is I want to change shirts when I get home, and D, where D is my wife will want me to put on a different shirt when I get home, then U, I should grab that umbrella. And then the conclusion, so I should get that umbrella if it's still raining. Therefore, the conclusion is if R, then U. If it's still raining, then I should grab the umbrella. And now I've concluded that this argument is just fine. There's nothing weird with how it's laid out. It's just harder to get it into standard form than usual. Maybe it's good that we have this one. Maybe I should have gone with a much simpler one. If it's raining, then the grass is wet. It's raining, therefore the grass is wet. Where R for it is raining and W for the grass is wet could be our symbols. And the symbolization of the argument would be a simple if R then W, R therefore W. So I hope you see how this works and how sometimes it's more difficult than other times, but how if you do it right, you can symbolize an argument and check to see if it's a valid argument a whole lot easier than if you just read the argument, try to discern the argument form by looking at all these words. No, don't do it. Don't even try. Try to see if it's a valid argument by looking at the argument form, the argument structure. Try to do that after you've identified the structure. Identify the structure in the most orderly possible fashion, which is make a scheme of abbreviation for the smallest statements in the argument. Now, let me just check this. I feel like there was something I left out. And I have no idea what it is. If there's anything I left out, let's hope it wasn't important, or let's hope it comes up in another video. All right. we are, I think we still have a few videos left in the introductory unit, but this will be very useful in our subsequent units. And I suppose if you've watched this far, thanks for watching, and maybe I'll see you on the next one, or maybe you'll see me because I don't see you, because that's not how YouTube works.